Well, happy Monday, everybody. My name's Larry Jacobs. This is Pre-K-12 Education Talk Radio on the 23rd of January, 2023. And thanks so much for being with us today. We do appreciate it, and maybe you're not even listening today. You might be listening on the archives. It's the nature of podcasting. We archive everything over at ace-ed.org. That's our home website for the American Consortium for Equity in Education. We always have new stuff up there, and we're putting together a new issue of our magazine, Equity and Access Pre-K-12, our online journal. The current issue is a darn good one. It's up there. Just click on the cover and read a good magazine. Okay, the only magazine, by the way, focused entirely on equity and access to learning for all kids for pre-K-12, so I hope you go over there and share that with other people. And we have SELtoday.org, our website over there, connected at teacher-retention.com, and all the podcasts and a lot of information and all that sort of stuff. So enjoy what we do. By the way, everything we do over there is free. So if you want to subscribe to the magazine, all that means is we're going to send you a link to the magazine when it comes out. It comes out every other month, so please sign on up. It's over at ace-ed.org. And that includes an invitation to my guest, Christina Cipriano. We're going to talk about the state of the evidence for social and emotional learning today with Chris, okay, who's coming back here. Hi, Chris. It's Larry here. How you doing?
Hi. Thank you so much for having me on. Great to be back.
It's my pleasure to have you here. Where are you today? Are you down in New Haven, or are you in Boston, or where are you?
I am actually in Boston at Logan Airport, so really fun time to have a conversation on my way. Are you
homeless? Are you homeless? Are you homeless? Where are you going?
No, just posted up in the terminal here before I board my flight. But very happy to chat with you about it today.
I hope. Where are you going? Good.
Yeah, I'm heading out to Los Angeles actually to visit with our community partners at Trajectory of Hope, doing some really great school-based work. Yeah.
That's terrific. I have to say, it's January 23rd. I live in Maine, as you probably remember, and we're getting 6 to 10 inches of snow right now. Okay, how was it down at Logan? In Boston?
Just pretty wet, and the snow's on the horizon. But hopefully, my flight will get out before it starts. So,
well, I hope so too. It's 9 in the morning, and just you want to get out of here, okay, and head off to beautiful L.A. And the weather's pretty good in L.A., so you have a good time out there. That's great. Okay, safe flying, my dear. I appreciate your hard work in all this. The state of that. Look, let me just say, Chris is an assistant professor at the Yale Child Study Center. Okay, Yale School of Medicine. She's director of research at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. She has a lot of time, so there's a lot of stuff to do. So I don't think she's going to be hanging on the beach in L.A. Okay, she's got work to do out there. And last time she was on with Dave Adams, our good friend from Urban Assembly, and we had talked about the fact that you were doing a big research project updating the state of evidence for SEL, social emotional learning, and that's exactly what we're talking about this morning. So, LA-bound lady, tell me a little bit about what's going on with this project and where we stand with it. Dr. Cipriano.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So
You're welcome.
We just completed a update to the state of the evidence for social emotional learning for students K to 12. It's a global review from studies available from 2008 through the end of 2020. And, the reason that we did this project was that the most seminal paper, it's Gerlach et al. 2011, Child Development. I'm sure, Larry, you're probably familiar with that paper. It is the most widely cited justification for SEL. So for all of the investments that we have and kind of the different policies and procedures in place, everyone's citing back to that paper. But, true story, a lot has changed in what we call SEL since the early 2000s. And so it was really time for an update. And so this is a large team, 10 researchers, over a decade of literature, really looking at the scope of what social emotional learning is in schools, a universal school-based SEL, and what types of outcomes we can expect to see students benefiting from. So it was an update, but really an evolution. And so I'm just really excited to share with you all that, this preprint is going to be available up on Open Science Framework on February 6th. So you're the first to hear it, Larry. It's going up very soon. It's a few weeks from now. And we'll be doing a lot of sharing about the findings and getting into the nuts and bolts as we move towards International Cell Day in March. But I can give you some high level of like what we're looking at here, if that would be helpful right now.
It would, and I want you to give me that website again, where this is going to be on February 5th, so I can put it in here.
So
Go ahead.
Absolutely, and I'll send you some info after we hop off call and I'm on some Wi-Fi. But yeah, no, it's called Open Science Framework, or OSF. That's where the stage 1 report, the registration was, and so we will be putting up a preprint while we go back and forth with child development, where the paper will inevitably end up as we're going through this review process. This is moving forward with what transparent open science looks like. So this is it's very exciting for all of us.
It is exciting.
You can see all 200 and something pages of it. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Right. No, that's it. I appreciate you letting us know that, and we're the first to know. Breaking news, everybody.
Yeah, little did we know when we scheduled this a couple of months ago, right? So wow. I was like, I think around late January will be a good time, and yeah, absolutely.
So where are we on all this, Chris? Just what a key. We're talking to a lot of educators in K-12, okay, and. You know what's going on out there. I mean, 2 weeks ago, some 6-year-old kid shot a teacher. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
My nephew is a principal in Haverhill, Massachusetts, and some kid in the school went nutty and started throwing stuff at the whiteboard. Okay, throwing chairs and stuff. Okay, Haverhill's a nice town. This is everywhere. Okay, things. We need social emotional learning. I want to talk about how much we need it in a few minutes. Where are we with all this? And I want to say again, you're at Yale, okay, and you're looking at this from a high perch, okay? But the work you do really needs to affect, all right, the classroom teacher and the individual kid. Okay, who's where are really and truly? I mean that with all due respect. Where are we right now with all this?
Yeah, goodness, so much there. You've given me a lot to unpack.
Yeah,
so
I know.
I'm gonna start by
I'll give you another doctorate if you can answer that in the next 20 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, let's see. Let me just kind of first step back and say that there is robust and overwhelming evidence that social emotional learning helps all kids. So that's been something that's been a hot topic contention. I mean, lots of people have been undercutting and kind of circumventing the narrative around it, right? We're hearing lots of people calling SEL other things and so forth. And so I just want to say, saying to you right here on this call that we have robust and overwhelming evidence of the significant effects on students' social, emotional, and academic outcomes when they participate in a SEL program. So at its simplest form, we can say these are worthwhile investments. And then I can tell you from looking at over 400 studies, over 50 countries represented, over 250 SEL programs, that the types of outcomes that we see are really specific and helpful. So let me give you an example. We used to talk about, from the seminal paper, we talk about it as like skills and attitudes and behaviors that increase when students are participating in SEL programs, and these improve. But what we can say now, because we've really strained the stew of what it is and what types of outcomes, is that we're seeing improvements in students' pro-sociality, right? They're being good citizens, their civic attitudes and behaviors. We're seeing differences in their experiences of school climate and safety, never looked at before until this review. And, to your earlier point, talking about some of the kind of upticks in violence in our nation's schools and the kind of more extreme or range of behaviors, externalizing behaviors, right? We found both that participation in social emotional learning programs improves students' experiences of school climate and safety, so they feel safer at school. And we found that it reduces the likelihood of externalizing behaviors, which is what I was hearing you saying before when talking about some of those extreme things that we might see in the school system.
So, and I like the way you just said that, externalizing the behavior. Yeah.
And let me stay on that one for just another second there, because it's an important distinction. This is something that's been clear across my work for the past decade, but it can't be said, and I can't say this enough, right? That variability in emotion expression and regulation is the norm. It's not the exception, right? And there are sometimes people have been like real quick to market or kind of quick to sell this, that there's kind of like a one size fits all here. But we really should be expecting there to be great variability in how we are experiencing our world and the ways in which we're choosing to regulate to have healthy and productive behaviors that come from it. And what's really exciting for me is that, in this review paper, we distill down to the discrete skills and strategies that are within these programs and begin to talk about them in terms of those types of behaviors in a really specific way, right? So we're not just saying, like, kids are happier if they have a program or kids are, better friends. We're talking about things like kids are, they're having reduced anxieties and stresses from their experiences in going through a SEL program, right? So they're more likely to be, be more productive at school. We looked at school functioning, types of academic behavior. So it's just a very exciting time to really dig into the weeds.
Well, I agree with you, and I think most people agree that SEL is incredibly important, which brings me to my next question. Okay, we talk about social emotional learning. By the way, thank you for that overview, which was great. We talk about social emotional learning and we make it separate, okay, from the rest of learning. We have a specific thing we call social emotional learning. And my question to you is, let me say it a different way. I think that's an error. Okay, the world of education is changing, and you know this certainly, like everybody else knows, that schools aren't the same as they were pre-pandemic or even 15 years ago or whatever. Things have changed, all right? And we separate SEL out. Oh, the school needs an SEL program. My question is, should that separation continue? Are we doing it? And it goes further. In teacher preparation in universities, I don't think there's, if there is, you can tell me where it is, that there's a course for teachers on teaching social emotional learning. There may be, but I haven't heard about it. Okay, and again, it's falling on the school districts. Yet, we still think we have to teach the 3 R's. And I remind everybody, only one of the 3 R's actually begins with R. Okay? It's time to make a change. Okay?
Absolutely.
It's time to make a change because the world these kids are in are different. Okay? They have information at their fingertips. All right? But they need help with other things to realize that. What are your thoughts on that, almighty Dr. Cipriano? Go ahead.
Oh my goodness! Another giant.
That's a killer.
Question.
I'll give you another doctorate. The University of Larry is known for handing out a lot of doctorates over the course of time. Okay, so be my guest.
Well, a couple of notes there. So first, we as a nation are moving away from the idea that SEL is like just another program. I think that, 5 years ago, that was really the height of the attention on that. And then it was like just another thing. And we're talking about intervention fatigue and the different types of interventions and implementation fatigue. And, then folks say, we don't have the money for it, or we have the money, but we can only do it at like 3 o'clock on Tuesday. Right. And, there is overwhelming evidence to suggest that if you ask kids how they feel at 3 o'clock on Tuesday, that you're like not benefiting anybody. Right.
You can ask me, and I'm going to give the same answer. 3 o'clock on Tuesday is not the best time.
We're moving. We've moved past that, right? We've moved past that. Where we're at now is we are in a state where the nuance and the specificity of like what it is we're talking about within SEL is really going to matter. And so when we think about like why schools may or may not want to adopt or may not adopt a comprehensive program, they need to be looking at what are the kind of specific program features and how they align with their school community's interests. Like, what are their values? What are they hoping for? What are the outcomes that they're seeking, right? Like, not all programs are going to do the same thing. And this review paper, we really get down into the granularity of this, of like the different types of program features, the different types of outcomes that can be expected. And we recognize that it's not a one-size-fits-all. So although we talk about it as universal school-based programming, right, not every program is doing the exact same thing, right? And so it won't be a good fit for all schools. And now, in addition, you mentioned about the teacher training program. And, there are a lot of pop-up courses and certificates that are coming around across the country. Definitely been reached out to buy a few. Yeah, definitely seeing some great momentum there. And I want to draw our attention to the special education training programs in our country because,
Please.
you know, I had a piece come out in the Progressive just a couple months ago now. I guess it was like early December. But, you know, this in the special ed community, which is where kind of I started my work over a decade ago, when we talk about social emotional learning.
Chris, that means you're going to heaven. That means you're going to heaven. All special ed teachers go to heaven.
Oh.
But please continue. Yes, congratulations.
So, you know, we've been doing social emotional learning since before it became a buzzword or an acronym that people were Googling and writing about and critiquing, right? And so, you know, it's the idea you were talking about, like how like embedding it, right? When we think about like social emotional goals that are embedded within an individual education plan, for example, like just one of the many examples of the ways in which it's kind of always there and always present. And so, you know, when we kind of take a step back of where to go from this review and from all of the kind of, you know, big investments that are being made in SEL, we really want to point people's attention to getting specific about the different elements of programs. So the what that's being taught, because it varies across programs. We documented over 600 skills and strategies in these programs. I mean, there's a lot of variability there. So what are you looking for? How do you want it to be implemented? So what are the different program features? Is it a program like Ruler, like where I work at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, my colleagues on the Ruler team, right? Ruler is known as a program that we invest in the adults first, right? Really strong evidence for that. Is it a program like Ruler, or is it a program that invests and it's just a classroom-based program where it goes right to the students first and kind of the adults learn through that process? Different styles for different types of learning communities, right? So really important to kind of look at those program features, and we can go through, like, there's a whole host of them, of different types that have different levels of effects in terms of the outcomes that we want for kids. But that being said, all that nuance, which I know is never, you know, not something that's like super tweetable or super shareable, we have to take a step back and say, what we can be very confident, there is overwhelming, robust evidence for the significant positive effects of social emotional learning. And I will tell you, Larry, I was like a little nervous when we started this project. I wasn't sure that we were going to get there in light of kind of all of the critiques and things that folks were popping up, you know, across the country and across the world. And there's just a wide variability in what is a SEL program. So I'm a person who believes in inclusion in action, right? So I included all the possible types of programs that people refer to as SEL. So, for example, mindfulness. Many mindfulness interventions popping up across the globe. They've been really popular the past couple of years, in particular here in the U.S., right? There's a whole sect of people who say mindfulness does not fall within social emotional learning. Oh. I took my team and I, we took the wholly inclusive approach here because we looked at the skills and strategies taught in programs, not what they're called, right? So we distilled down to, like, are we looking at intra and interpersonal skills? And if they are, then they are a social emotional learning program, whether or not they consider themselves one, right? So that means we put many mindfulness programs in the pot, right? And then we strained it out and we look at the different types of outcomes. And so in doing that level of diligence and kind of being all inclusive, there's something we call it in research, it's like heterogeneity. There's a lot of difference in there, a lot of different types of programs. And that could have led us to have, you know, not so good effects. And on the contrary, we found overwhelming positive evidence. And for that, I'm just so proud and excited for our field. And this whole review will be publicly available, everything about this. So this is a registered report. It was in principal acceptance by Child Development Stage 1 in November of 2021. So that's how long these things take to finish. And so it will all be available so folks can be using this data set, I hope, for the next decade to come, to help to support us in really understanding what it is, how it works, and who it benefits.
And so let me go back to a question. Thank you, Chris, again. Your thoughts are so terrific, okay, and I appreciate it, okay? We have all the SEL programs, and we know that good SEL works, okay? The question is, how good is the teaching, okay? And I have to go back to what I said before. SEL is not teaching SEL is not embedded in teacher education. Okay, whether you're teaching English, elementary, literature, science, whatever, SEL isn't embedded. Teaching SEL is not embedded in that, and it has to be. Okay? Now, I know a professor at a given university who's teaching science education thinks they're a scientist. Okay? But they're really teaching people how to teach. And teaching is a science. You can say it's an art, but the neuroscience is a science. How people learn is a science. The way we teach them is science. Okay? How good is the teaching of all this? Okay? And we know it works. I got you. Okay? I got you.
Yeah.
Okay? It works. Okay, and by the way, I love what you said about special education. They are I never thought about this. They are the obvious and natural SEL teachers, but again, we don't want to keep it separate. I want it to be embedded into, and so the schools, they want it to be embedded, okay, because what you're saying, they know it works. Okay, now we have the evidence to prove it, but they know intrinsically it works. But now, how do we make sure people know
Absolutely.
how to teach it and embed it? Again, Dr. Cipriano. By the way, what time's your plane leave? I'm not yapping too much here, am I?
No,
okay?
You're good. You're good. We got time. We're good.
Okay.
Thank you for that. So, so there is great variability in how teachers engage in social emotional teaching, right? So I'm gonna separate this out for a minute. So there's social emotional learning. We think about the skills and strategies, right? But what you're really asking about is the social emotional teaching, or SET, which many people in the field kind of write about, although I don't think it's caught on in kind of how programs talk about it.
Yeah.
And I'm actually leading a team right now. We've got an IES-funded grant. We're developing something called the SEL Observation Checklist, the SELOC, for elementary schools. And I raised that because we've actually partnered with 50 schools across the country to look at what we call the pedagogies of SEL, to identify them and to help schools work through them. So the teaching, it's social emotional teaching, right? And so regardless of what program, whether you've taken it off the shelf or you Googled it or you developed it in home in your district, right? What are those aspects of the teaching? What does that look like in the classroom? And how can we, and this is what we're doing in this federally funded grant, how can we help to support educators by building awareness with their leaders and across the adults in the school to improve that practice? So for example, what is a social emotional pedagogy? Well, one that we're kind of working through right now is something called validation, right? And helping to draw teachers, draw their awareness to and attention to how, they may validate one student's emotion expression in a classroom, and in validating that student's experience, they may be invalidating another student's experience. What does that look like, and how do kind of those biases show up? So for example, they may say something or they may set an example this is really this should be easy. This will be easy, right? When giving out an assignment, or kids saying something I'm really excited about this right now. It's really it's great. You should feel excited right now, right? And telling a student how they should feel. Well, the kids in the class who are not feeling excited about that right now, feeling nervous or frustrated, right? They're implicitly having experience my emotion is not my experience, or the way I want to regulate. We see this in the way teachers who are more or less likely to let kids kind of move around the room and the ways that they engage, right? So this is where we kind of cross into some of those concerns around behavior control and so forth, right? Where things could potentially go wrong, or kind of old patterns of teaching and learning. And so anyway, with this tool that we're developing in partnership with these 50 schools, we're really looking to kind of distill this so that we can help to promote, have coaches in classrooms that are embedded in the school. So your assistant principal or your third grade teacher on special assignment, who could help to kind of observe in the classrooms and say, that was really great, Mrs. L. I loved the way that you were modeling your affective experiences out loud when you were talking about the traffic, having to deal with the traffic this morning on your way into work, right? And how you were feeling frustrated and how you took a deep breath and so forth. And how that pointing to those pedagogies and the ways in which we're teaching our students, which are both explicit, implicit, can help to promote and improve the quality of social emotional teaching. That will, we hope, right, also improve the program outcomes that we see when you invest in a program, as well as what's your new reading curriculum now? What's your new math curriculum and so forth?
Where are we now, right now, with all this? And when you look at K-12 across the board, okay, and you're in New England, okay, but there's the Deep South, there's the West, there's the Midwest. Where are we now with all of this?
Well, I think there's tremendous variability in where we are now, right? We've got educators who have who have been doing kind of the work that they need to do to kind of work through either their biases or their experiences and how they show up in their classrooms to ensure that they're being fully inclusive. And then we've got folks who are on the way in their journey, but maybe for, due to state mandates or due to policies at play or district-wide mandates, they may be fearful or scared to grow their practice further, right? That's a very real thing. We talk about how, when a teacher's inability to validate or address something in their classroom that may be considered contentious within their district or state, in their absence of doing so, right, they're actually validating that, right, and letting something kind of be said or go unsaid. And then there are folks who don't necessarily recognize that there's anything to change in their practice, right? And no fault to them. Let me just step back for a second.
You're right.
Right? Like neurologically, as we develop, right, we start to fill in the pieces. Our brains mature, right? We fill it in as we go along. And so it takes a conscious and critical effort to stop and see and understand that the teacher I am I'm not teaching to a whole bunch of students who are me when I was their age. Right, that's a very simple practice. I'm not even talking about it from a bias standpoint yet, just purely from the ways in which our brains work, right? If I look at a classroom of third graders, of 20 third graders, and I just view them all as, what I saw on their kind of one-page paper coming in, the ways in which they're either sitting or attending or not, and I think about them in terms of, how I was when I was in third grade, or the ways I would expect to be normative or typical, right? I'm not doing a great job teaching, right? I'm not meeting them where they are. And so that principle, right, it really, it gets quite elevated as we kind of move through and think about what that looks like from a social emotional standpoint.
And what
so
we have to do
to come on this one. Yeah,
and I'm telling you, one of the things we have to do, if we teach teachers in school just to embed social emotional learning and teach them how to do it, a lot of aggravation, they're going to understand what to do. Okay, it's not something separate anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, education's
exactly.
changing. And we have to change the way we teach it. And the best example of that is that they don't teach MDs how to raise leeches to remove bad blood. They use different methods now. Okay. Point being, things change. Okay, and pedagogy change in the world. The world of kids is changing. Okay, it's that simple. You don't have to. You don't have to learn how to sterilize a needle anymore. You don't have to learn how to dispose of it. Okay, there's a big difference, and that's what we're doing. I want to ask you this, and then I'm going to let you go in 2 minutes. SEL and Equity. Okay, and their Urban Assembly is a good example of this. They work with a lot of the urban schools in New York City. Okay, and they have a full they embed SEL into everything they do with Urban Assembly. Okay, and they're dealing with kids, again, it's a racial question, it's a gender question, etc., and they've had incredible success. Okay, in other words, there is no barrier regarding equity. Just talk about equity and SEL for a second, because I think people have to understand that one. And again, Urban Assembly is a good example.
Oh, totally. I mean, so I mentioned I'm at the airport right now, flying out to LA to be with our partners, Structuring Hope. But the other folks who are flying out there are folks from the Urban Assembly. So this is our joint partnership work.
Tell David
so we're
said
looking
hello.
at. I will. And we're looking at how social emotional learning assessment as intervention can be embedded successfully and implemented in a sustainable way in school systems that may or may not be excited about the idea. Let's be real, right? May or may not be excited about it because of all the different kind of ways in which it's either been misconstrued in the media or it's been understood that social emotional learning isn't for my family or for my kids. It actually, maybe it's even exclusionary to it. So to your question about looking at SEL and the intersection of equity, for me, it starts with the idea of understanding that emotion variability expression is variable. And that is at the heart of the equitable or inequitable processes. Because when we start to see emotions as information and we start to take them that the whole range of emotions are valid and they're all information in how we understand and the baseline with which we interact in our world, we then start to see how the ways in which our bias and our misconceptions come into play and how we inequitably treat certain kids, people, family, on the basis of those experiences. Now, you can add on it all of the other kind of reasons why folks may treat different people of different race, class, gender, disability, sexuality, right, in different ways. But I'm going to enter that conversation from a place of thinking about it in terms of those skills and strategies and the way they show up in our world. So the ways in which we were, culturally affirmed in our emotion expression and regulation, the ways in which we interact with our teachers and our school systems, the families who are trying to navigate, behaviors and or exclusionary practices that are biasing their kids with school systems that are seemingly treating them in a different way, right? How do you kind of unpack that? Well, for me, you start with understanding emotions or information, recognizing the variability, and doing that self-work, and then that interpersonal work and working together with those families to break down the silos and paths that have been structured around the school system, so they're kind of operating outside of it. So it is, we talk about it in our work as like assessment as intervention, is that I use assessment methodologies as a way to kind of start these really critical conversations of recognizing kind of what role do I have in my school system to like uphold some kids or some families is better than others. Like, who am I not hearing? Who am I not seeing? And what can I be doing better to help to support all of them? And that is a social emotional process, right? These are not, the books that you take off the shelf and you ask someone how they feel at 3 o'clock on Tuesday, to go back to where we started, right? This is really deep, intentional, collaborative conversation and work that takes energy and time and a willingness to show up and be there and to stay in learner mode, to learn throughout. So in terms of like what we know,
yeah. I'm just, I'll just say this. If we get this right, okay, we have a big problem with getting people to become educators. And in this crazy world we live in, we have a really big problem with getting people to stay as educators, okay? It's a teacher retention problem. But if we get this right, because they're going nuts, and I don't blame them, because everything is changing within the schools. There's so many pressures, et cetera. So if we get this right with the SEL and teach teachers how to deal with it for real, okay, and incorporate it, okay, into everything they do, it's going to change the system and make the system better. And it's going to make a higher level of educator. Chris, I didn't mean I interrupted you.
It is. No, you're fine. No, it is. And, and for me, when I think about that, I think about, like, that's the world I want for my kids. That's the school system I want them growing up in. That's the experiences I want them having for their children, right? And so it's so much more than a program or a approach, but it really is, a movement, and a movement to understand and kind of put emotions and social processing at the center of our education system. And I'm just so honored to get to play like a tiny little part in that journey.
Give yourself more credit.
Yeah,
you do more than a tiny little part, believe me. Okay, I'm going to let you go. Go get your flight. This is great. You have a homework assignment, too, the dual homework assignment. A is to send me all the links for Open Science Framework, okay?
You got it.
And B is to yell at Dave Adams, my good friend, and tell him to give me a call, okay, because he owes me a couple of phone calls. Okay, so you're seeing him out in L.A.
Know.
Yeah. Okay,
I will let him know. All right, take care. Thank you so much for having me.
I'll do the Harry Truman thing. Give him hell, Chris. Give him hell, Chris. Okay? Get Dave to call me, okay? It's terrific, all right? Have a safe flight. Enjoy yourself.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You.
Take care.
Oh, you're welcome.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Chris Cipriano, everybody. Dr. Chris Cipriano is an assistant professor at Yale Child Study, Yale School of Medicine, director of research at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. Is that enough? Okay. It's unbelievable. Okay, thanks, Chris. This was great. I'll send you all the link and everything else. Hey, everybody, share this, okay? It's important. We're going to archive the show over at ace-ed.org. I'm Larry Jacobs on a snowy day here in Maine. This is the Pre-K-12 Education Talk Radio. See everything we do over at ace-ed.org, and thank you.